Welcoming people. Welcome. See if we have anybody live yet. Not quite yet. When you do get logged on, or if you're watching this from home, make sure to subscribe somewhere, one side or the other. There'll be a subscribe button on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube videos, and you'll get more of this in the future. And if you're on Facebook, you can follow us if you haven't already, and follow the aquarium. We're really excited to have Miss Julia from the aquarium today, from Tennessee Aquarium, along with Corey Hagan, the Director of Education here at Reflection Riding Arboretum Nature Center. How are you guys today?
We're good. How are you?
Doing well. So I hear it was a late night for everybody.
It was indeed. I got up a little fuzzy-headed this morning. The dog, much like Corey's children, won't let me sleep past a certain time. So, but Corey's right. It was worth it. We had a good time sitting in the pasture, waiting for the waves of the little people to come in.
Awesome. Hey, if you guys just logged in, write to us, make a comment if you're on Facebook or YouTube. We're seeing both of those platforms comments come in. We got one from Heather DeGaetano. She says, hello, Julia.
What a pleasure. I saw your posts earlier this week, Heather. Thank you.
Let us know where you're logging in from. I'm assuming most of our audience is probably in the Chattanooga region, which means that you all are people who could help with the City Nature Challenge. We'll get into kind of what that is and what that's all about here in just a second. And we're going to talk to Miss Julia about blacklighting for insects, and might as well switch on over. I'm going to share my screen here real quick. While I'm doing that, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? First off, I'm Mark McKnight, President, CEO at Reflection Riding Arboretum and Nature Center. We really appreciate you logging on. We would love to be doing this in person with you today, but unfortunately we can't. So we're making lemonade today. That's what we're doing. Corey?
I'm Corey Hagan. I'm the Director of Education at Reflection Riding Arboretum and Nature Center, and we're thrilled to be the host organization for the City Nature Challenge in Chattanooga, and we're really thrilled to have the Tennessee Aquarium be a part of what we're doing. And Julia's been a friend for a long time, about 15 years now, and I'm extremely excited to have her be a part of this.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for joining from South Carolina. Julia, you want to introduce yourself?
As I thank you, Corey, as I am pleased to be here. And I'm so glad under the circumstances that we're doing this and recording it. Excuse me, I got ahead of myself. I'm Julia Gregory. I'm a senior educator at the Tennessee Aquarium. I have been there for nearly 23 years. And in that time, I've been privileged to work with my colleague, Bill Haley, to establish Bug Club, which happened for 16 years, and then morphed appropriately into Nature Nuts. And now Betsy Bowden is my partner in crime with those Nature Nuts. So it's a pleasure to be here and to get to have blacklighted with Corey last night and to have the recording of this live stream for my Nature Nuts to watch, because our May adventure in the field was to have been a blacklighting trip, which we had to cancel. So this is a win-win situation for me. Thank you for inviting me.
We're excited to have you, Julia. Thanks so much for showing up for us and sharing your wisdom. I was playing up your knowledge earlier about just of insects and moths and everything, and I know that is not you talked me down from that, but I think I called you a naturalist in the description, and I think that's a term that's worth talking about, because none of the three of us are experts in any particular thing, as far as I know. At least I'm not a PhD in any kind of biology or anything like that, but I have really just always loved nature, and I saw my mom joined. Hey, Mom. And Angela Lee from Nashville, Tennessee, thanks for joining us as well. But we are so privileged to live in an incredibly biodiverse region, and there's just so much to see and so much to learn about in our area. So to me, and I don't know if you guys have other thoughts about it, but to me, a naturalist is just somebody who's curious about the world and starts asking questions. And we're all at different points in that journey, but it's a fun one for sure.
I certainly respect experts and specialists, but you inspire me to share something that my father used to say, which is a specialist is someone who learns more and more about less and less until he knows everything about nothing. So he may be the reason that I like to look at everything when I go outside. It makes it my home and a happy place to be.
And I think Mark hit the key word, which is curiosity. Curiosity is what drives all of us to learn new things. And being a naturalist, I'm curious about everything that happens in the natural world, and it makes me want to learn more about it.
Absolutely. If you're just joining, looks like we had a few more people join. Comment for me. Let me know where you're joining from. I'm going to switch over while you guys are doing that and get us started, kind of give you a little bit of an update on the City Nature Challenge. I'll rewind for those of you who haven't already heard about the City Nature Challenge, and I'll tell you a little bit about what it is. So City Nature Challenge is in progress. We are a day in at this point. It is a 4-day effort, April 24th through the 27th this year. The City Nature Challenge is organized globally by the California Academy of Sciences and the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. It actually started as kind of a friendly rivalry between LA and San Francisco, as the naturalists / nerds in those cities started to go out in a really focused way and observe nature inside of their cities. It's interesting to me, as much research as we have in the sciences in general, there is a bit of a gap of knowledge in terms of the biodiversity of cities. So that's kind of the genesis of this whole challenge is, and it makes sense. I mean, if I'm going to study anything, let's say I'm going to study insects, I'd probably rather spend my time in the jungle of Nicaragua compared to the concrete jungle in which many of us live. But as we are increasingly urbanizing worldwide, it is important to understand what's happening with biodiversity. And it's actually a theme in landscape architecture. The last one of these live streams that we did was with Matt Whitaker from our board, who's a landscape architect. And this is a big concern in landscape architecture. As we impact more and more of the world, we have to understand what we're doing with biodiversity, and hopefully we can plant native plants and design our cities to be resilient. And it is pretty amazing once you start looking what we have around us in the city. Locally, the City Nature Challenge is organized by yours truly and Corey Hagan and our many friends, the kind of friends of reflection writing. So thanks for participating. It's pretty easy to participate, but before I get into that, let me just say we miss you guys. This is a picture of Reflection Writing Arboretum Nature Center. If you haven't been, once we get past the whole pandemic shutdown thing, you need to come visit us. It's absolutely stunning as we get into spring and summer. Of course, actually, it's beautiful all the time, but it's easier to get people out when the weather's nice. This is a robin in my backyard. One of the things that this challenge is all about is, because of the situation that we find ourselves in, it's really about paying attention to what's already around us. So whether that is a sort of urban street and a local park that you can walk around while you're walking your dogs, or if that is a big spread in your backyard, there's plenty to see in this region. And it's really easy to participate. All you have to do is sign up for iNaturalist. You don't have to follow our project. If you're in the 16 county region that Thrive Regional Partnership sort of defined for us, but that greater Chattanooga region in Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia, all of your observations will automatically upload to the project. But I want you to follow the project anyways, because we are providing updates on there, and there's lots of cool stuff coming in on the project already. So do that. And then if you're new to iNaturalist, go make a few observations, poke around, see what other people are seeing. And what we're trying to do here is create what's called a verifiable observation. And in this case today, we're talking about how to do that with insects. We'll get into that a bit more. And then at the end, we're going to do a bit of a Q&A and take suggestions from you all, the audience. So go sign up for iNaturalist, iNaturalist.org, or on the app stores, whatever kind of phone that you have. We're going to talk you through this process, but what you're going to do is go observe, and then you're going to try to identify. Julia's going to help us with some of that. There's a whole community globally that will help as well. And then this is kind of it's really a social network for people who are interested in nature. So there's a lot of discussion that can happen as well. And then all of your observations, if you make them so that they're verifiable, they can become research grade. And if they're research grade, they will actually be part of a global database that scientists can and do use to provide management plans for species, to understand how ranges are changing, all kinds of cool stuff that's happening there. A couple tips for your iNaturalist account. I encourage people to use your real name. You don't have to, but like I said, this is kind of a social network for people who are interested in this stuff. So if you use your name, people can contact you. I had somebody this morning contact me about things that we're seeing here in the South Side in my neighborhood. Put some interest in your bio. It's always interesting when people help identify, and I'll click through to their bio and say, well, what is this person studying, or what are they curious about? And then I'm asking everyone, please license your photos, your sounds, your observations for science. This is one of the coolest things about the platform. If you leave this box checked when you go sign up, everything that you produce and upload for the website can be used by scientists for all of the reasons that I mentioned earlier. So to follow our project, go to reflectionwriting.org/CNC. I think we're up to like 30-something members of the project right now, which is pretty cool. You can also search for it by City Nature Challenge 2020, but it's definitely easier to use that URL to jump you straight to it. So really quickly, let's talk about what is a verifiable observation. A couple things. It has to have a date. It has to be geo-referenced. There are different levels of geo-reference, but it has to have some kind of geo-reference. It has to have photos or sounds, and then it can't be captive or cultivated. I think I'll skip over most of what that means right now. Hopefully you guys have seen the earlier live streams. If not, you can go back to our YouTube channel and find them and find out a little bit more about that. But one of the things that I'm going to try to do right now is talk about you have to have enough information visually for others to help you with the ID. And so hopefully this blacklighting demonstration is going to help you get up close with insects that are oftentimes tough to get because they're flying away from you as you're trying to take pictures of them. It's also tricky with plants, which we talked about on one of the live streams recently. So to kind of work all that in backwards, some of the observations that are coming in are not really that useful to science because either the location is private. I do recommend that people obscure the location if you're around your home, which we all basically are right now. But if you keep rolling past obscure and it goes to private, then that no one can see that, even the scientists that are trying to use it. I do see a couple coming in, not so many because most people are doing it from their phone, but there are some that don't have a date. You can go add a date later. So if you're taking pictures on an SLR camera or something like that and then uploading them, you just have to go input the date. Captive and cultivated organisms, they have some use, and we're not discouraging people from posting them, but we are asking people to mark it as captive and cultivated. That means if you go out in your garden and you take pictures of things that you have planted, we would like for you to mark them as cultivated. If you go to the zoo, take pictures of a lion in Tennessee, that's going to be a captive animal. It's not all that useful to science. And then the other one that I see more often than not is just bad or ambiguous photography. So things that are blurry or that have 2 or 3 different species in a single photo, and you're not really indicating kind of what is there. All right, at this point, it's Julia's turn. Tell us about this blacklighting setup that we see.
So this is a wonderful way to trap insects and be able to have a closer look at them. Actually, insects are way easier than birds because it's not illegal to trap them. And there are lots of different ways to attract and hold for a short time to identify lots of different kinds of insects. And this is just one of the ways. And it's fairly simple. What you see on your screen is an old tablecloth clothespined to a piece of rope. On the right side, the rope is tied to the hood of my car. The hood is up. On the left side, the rope is tied to my pasture fence. I backed the car into a small paddock in my pasture, and I chose that spot so that there would be woods and grass nearby, and there's a very small pond down in one of the pastures, and I was hoping to pull a few aquatic insects, but it didn't work. Hope springs eternal, though. So you set up this clothesline affair, and you'll notice that there's a sheet underneath the tablecloth, a sheet lying on the ground. That's pretty important to have, because sometimes by the time the insects get to your sheet, they're tired and they won't go up the sheet, but they'll stop just short of it because they were attracted by the light. Now, this rig that I'm using, this light rig, clips to my car battery. It does not pull a great deal of power. So when I'm finished blacklighting, as long as I can stay awake, I can still start the car and go home. A very important aspect of it. So it's a tube, a long tube with a black light that's cushioned in a plastic mesh. And you can see at the bottom of the tube, there's something that ties it off. It's important to pull the light away from the sheet so that it lights up as much of the sheet as possible. And so I have a strip of toweling tied to the bottom of that light. And then when I get to the field, I tie it to a rock or a branch. I've never had to resort to tying it to a child yet, but they're handy as well, to pull that light away from the sheet a little bit.
Julia?
Yes.
Brooke and her daughter Megan have joined us. And
oh, good.
Brooke had a question as far as whether blacklighting will work if you live in a neighborhood.
It will work to a certain extent. And the Brooke knows enough to know that if there are other lights in the area, those lights will be competing with your black light. So you don't want to blacklight right next door to the fireworks store that has the huge mercury vapor or halogen lights shining on their sign. That's a good place to collect insects in the morning after they've beaten their heads on the lights all night and they're stunned and dying, and you can collect them before the starlings come and eat them. But if you want to blacklight, having a dark place is a good idea. That's why using this particular rig that clips to the car battery is helpful, because you can drive the car to a dark place. If you are, however, unable or unwilling to leave your home, truth to tell, don't spend the money on the black light. Put a sheet under your porch light and make sure that you have a white bulb, not a yellow bug bulb, but a white bulb in your porch light. Actually, last night, Corey and I did a little experiment. I left the house lights on the porch and came and checked them periodically. And we were getting all the same insects at the porch light, with a couple of exceptions, that we were getting down on the black light. But if I had put a sheet, those insects would have stayed. The big difference last night between the black light rig and the porch light was that the insects at the porch light didn't have a place to hang and rest. So if you'll put out a sheet for them, just tucked up under that porch light. Don't create a fire hazard, please. But under the porch light, and then coming down and out to give the insects a place to land. And then if you're a movie buff, you know that the insects sit on the sheet and look at the light and say, "It's so beautiful." And they're there for you to admire and identify. Great question, Brooke. Thank you.
Heather also had a great question. And what are the most common kinds of bugs we'll see if we do this at home in Chattanooga?
Don't you hate it when people say it depends? But I have to. It depends upon the season. Obviously, we're not going to blacklight at Christmas, or it's going to be very dull because there aren't many insects out. There are a few, but not many. So we want to do it in the warm season. But for example, last night, Corey and I saw beetles, but they weren't the same kinds of beetles that we're likely to see in August when it's been quite warm for a time. And some more insects have had a chance to go through more of the stages of their life cycle. It also depends upon where you blacklight. If you blacklight close to water, we've blacklighted at the River Gorge Trust down by the river, and you just get covered up with caddisflies. And what did we have? One caddisfly on the sheet last night, Corey?
Yes.
And then one under the porch light here at the house. But later in the season, or closer to the pond or to Candy's Creek, we'd get more caddisflies. So it depends upon where you are, and it depends upon where when in the season you're blacklighting, which is the wonderful thing about it, because it can be like a hobby. And you can use a journal, or you can use iNaturalist to keep track of what you see. Let's go on a camping trip once a month to, I don't know, Chester Frost County Park when they open again, and see what different insects we get at our campsite once a month for as long as we can stand to sleep outdoors at night. Or even more fun, at your porch light. The 15th of the month, we're going to blacklight, or the third Saturday night of the month, we're going to blacklight, and we're going to keep track of what we see. And iNaturalist makes it really easy. You can record what you see, whether you positively identify it or not, and then you can get help identifying it. Insects, all right, let's start with nature. Nature is such a satisfying thing to be aware of and to study. And insects are the bomb. They're the best part of nature. I'm not biased or anything, but there are so many of them. It's why I picked insects. There are so many of them that I can live to be 150 years old, and still every morning when I get up, there's going to be some new insect to learn about, and even in my own yard. So they're just fascinating. I think I hear somebody laughing at me.
I'm laughing with you.
I see.
I totally get it. One answer that I actually had for Heather's question is, well, you can go to iNaturalist and check it out. And so let me share with you guys, if you're not all that familiar with iNaturalist, there are so many cool things that you can do with it. I'm actually going to switch to where I'm actually sharing the live City Nature Challenge. So here in just a second, you'll see my screen here. Oops, I'm trying to figure out how to drive this thing. There we go. Okay, so rolling up to the top here, this is what the City Nature Challenge actually looks like. If you go to reflectionwriting.org/CNC, I create a little redirect so it comes right to this page. We have 118 people who have participated so far, 1,200 observations. If you roll down, you can kind of see. You can see, first of all, Betsy Bowden has the most observations, as well as the most species currently. But you can also click on this stats thing here, and this is where it gets really fun because it'll show you, I was talking about research grade observations. It shows you how many are research grade. We're at about not quite 30% right now, so a lot that still need observations. If anybody is good at observations, come and help us. But then it also breaks down the types of species that people are finding. So plants right now are 67% of the number of species that people have found. Insects are 14.72. So Julia needs to keep working there. Let's find some more for us. Birds, everybody's into birds, and including me. But birds actually don't represent a ton of the biodiversity in this region. We're only at 6% in terms of what's been observed so far. Fungi, 4%, and then you have some other things too. Mammals are very small because everybody knows as you're moving up probably not everybody knows, but as you move kind of up the trophic pyramid, there are going to be fewer mammals. That makes sense. There aren't that many arachnids, which is interesting, 13 so far, 4 amphibians. One thing too that you'll see is the ones that have the most comments and faves. I was actually talking about this cave salamander earlier. This is one of Betsy Bowden's discoveries. Let's give that a second to load. Hopefully everybody is seeing the stream come through okay. I definitely think that this whole stay-at-home thing is overloading the internet. Even here in Chattanooga, where we have the fastest internet in the world. But this is a little cave salamander. How cute is that? So let's go back to Heather's question, and let me actually see if I go back and click on the insects. We'll be able to figure out exactly what people are seeing. And we might actually be able to do a little bit of a live ID here. One thing that I think is cool about this view is you can actually see where the observations are coming in. And no surprise here, but the majority of them are kind of clustered around Chattanooga, around downtown, the neighborhoods, and there's a bit of a cluster in Cleveland. That makes sense because that's where people are. I think if we weren't on stay-at-home orders, you might see some little clusters around the Chattahoochee or around maybe the battlefield, that kind of thing, where people would be going out to the parks. But since people are pretty much at home, that's what we're seeing right now. I actually find it easier if you really want to see what people are doing to click on the list view, and then you're just going to see the place, you're going to see where or when it was added, you're going to see who added it, and then you're going to see what they think it is. Julia, tell me something that you think is interesting here, and I'll stop on it.
Oh my, well, let me get a little closer to my screen and see. Oh, we've got some hardcores. Oh, you found the mosquito, Mark. That's good.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of mosquito, but
Right before he smashed it.
actually, this is cool. Do you see this? I have not seen one of these.
A lunate zeal moth.
That looks cool.
I have to admit that all those little brown moths with squiggly lines and spots and hairy heads and feet do run together. And I am not, I warned, ladies and gentlemen, I warned these men when they invited me to do this, that I am no moth expert. I have never been blacklighting with a group of people without having somebody who's more expert than I am. And my go-to man in Chattanooga is Bill Haley. Because one year he decided he was going to teach himself moths, and he got a black light and he got a moth book. This was before iNaturalist, and he went out and sat in his yard and learned moths. He's an amazing man. And I think he's been sending in some photographs from his black lighting. We had a simultaneous event with him last night. Oh yeah, that Megan, she's a smart girl. She knows. She knows. Good job, Megan.
Brooke also had a great question for the City Nature Challenge and iNaturalist in general. Is it better to only submit observations of things that are new to us, or should we record species every time we find it? And I would say record a species every time you find it, because that is a different observation point, and it gives more data to scientists as far as potential population and spread.
Yeah, and it is an interesting question. I mean, if you went out and take a picture of every single robin you saw at this time of year, your naturalist feed would be all robins, which is kind of okay. I mean, it shows that the occurrence. I mean, it is occurrence data, and it shows that there are a lot of robins. But I definitely see that there is a bias, a sort of natural bias, I think, toward things that people things that are less obvious and less common. I strike a balance. I usually take a picture of everything that I see, but I certainly spend more time kind of looking for the unusual, especially with birds, because those are the things that I'm generally looking for. But I guess I'm curious. So let's go back to the slides that y'all sent me some photos earlier. Let me take one other question real quick from Heather. How can we tell that our uploads to iNaturalist got to the Chattanooga Challenge? Let me go back to my screen real quick. Give me just a second. I'm going to show you how you find that.
And I will say that a lot of people have been trying to sign up for the project itself, and you don't have to be signed up for the project for your data to be entered into the City Nature Challenge. As long as you're within the parameters that Mark set up as far as the 16 county region, your data, your observations will go into the City Nature Challenge.
Yeah, so again, I'll say it again because I do want people to join the project. It's reflectionwriting.org/CNC, but you don't have to. Your observations, if you're in the 16 county region, will come in regardless. And let me show you what the map looks like, and I'll show you how this project is set up. So if you roll down to the bottom of the main page, you'll see that light yellow shading there, and it is a 16 county region that makes up this Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, kind of greater Chattanooga region. Interestingly, and this is something that I saw today, if you zoom in on this map, you'll see that there are a couple things that are outside of this region. Corey, I'm going to ask you this question and see if you have thought of this. Why would we have observations? If I set this up to where it's just these 16 counties on this list here, why would I end up with observations outside of our boundaries?
The only thing I can think of is that the picture is GPS coordinated for inside of the region, but the data was uploaded from outside the region.
That's a good hypothesis, and we are scientists, so hypotheses are important, but you're wrong. Actually, what that is I'm continuing to encourage people to obscure their location. So don't make it private, but obscure it. What that does is it randomizes where that dot's going to show up. So that could be somebody in Mentone. It could be somebody in Fort Payne. Who knows? But somebody inside this region that we defined posted something probably from their own home, and they wanted to, for privacy reasons, they wanted to obscure that data. So it makes it a little odd because when I first ran into this, I just couldn't figure out. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong setting the project up. And then finally it occurred to me, it's because it's just mapped, and it kind of lines up on the map. So that's what that is. Anyways, if you want to see if you are contributing, which the best way to do that is to go over to one of these, go to this leaderboard and go to this, either the tab that says view yours, or you can do view all and figure out where you are in the order of things. So I'm just going to go to view all and see how these 100, we have about 150 115 users, I think, right now. No, 124 observers. It's great. So if I search, because I don't know what your username is, Heather, but if you find your username on here, you'll know that your observations are successfully making it into the project. And then if you wanted to, you could also click into that. So I'm going to go find Corey, who is number 5 right now on our leaderboard. And I'm going to switch over to observations. And we can actually see what Corey has been observing. Resurrection fern, that's one of my favorites. It's a fun one. Poison ivy is one of my least favorites, but it is pretty.
It's an important wildlife food. The birds eat the berries, which is one of the ways it gets spread all over the place. And there's also a poison ivy sawfly, which is in the same order as bees and wasps and ants. And the sawfly lays its eggs around the edge of the poison ivy leaf, and the larvae eat the poison ivy leaf. And I want to know how I can get more poison ivy sawflies.
I'm actually curious about that, Julia, so I'll ask you, because I've seen, at least in a lot of the common names of the insects that I'm finding around town, there often is there's a plant name. So there's I saw one that was a tulip. I think it was a tulip moth of some sort.
That we had last night on our sheet, yes.
Yeah, what was that? And how does that relate to, did they only eat the certain plant, or?
Right. Many insect larvae are very specific about the plants that they can eat. Butterflies are famous for that pickiness. There are some butterfly larvae, some caterpillars that are generalists and can eat 2 or 3 different kinds of leaves, but not many. And so a lot of insects have to find the right plant in order to reproduce. And so you find those insects on those plants a lot. And so the casual observer would say, oh, I see that sawfly on the poison ivy all the time. And in describing it to her neighbor, she says, you know, that poison ivy sawfly. And then scientists link the two because it makes sense if the plant is that important in the natural history and the life cycle of the insect.
That is actually a really good kind of segue into the native plant conversation. So we, at Reflection Writing Arboretum Nature Center, we have a native plant nursery, and we have been selling plants to the community for 30, I think this is the 34th year of the spring native plant sale. So if you have if you find that particular, insect, somewhere around, close by, you're going to have that plant. And if you don't have that plant, you don't have that insect. And so I talk a lot about people who love a particular butterfly or something like that. And I say, well, did you know that you have to plant, let's say the pipevine swallowtail, you have to have the pipevine for that insect to exist. It's a really fascinating dynamic.
That's exactly right. And people who garden for wildlife are very aware of that and love to come to your plant sales. I know I've hauled a lot of plants home from Reflection Writing, and it allows me over the course of the warm season to have an amusing variety of butterflies here.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to go back to the screen where I was showing people what you guys found last night, because I did have a few things that Corey sent me. And let's talk about, okay, so if you go back to this, we have our black light hanging. It is powered from the car battery, which is not going to prevent us from restarting the car because it takes very little energy. You have the bottom tied to a child that's being very still. And then if you zoom in, what is this? This is instantly recognizable to me because these things are taking over outside of my house right now.
But they're really, really important. They're actually aquatic macroinvertebrates. Who wants to tell me what it is? Y'all show off a little bit.
I would call it a crane fly. Tibula, I believe, is the family.
And I would agree with you.
And I don't know which one it is.
But their larvae can be found, they're only barely aquatic. Their larvae can be found living just in wet ditches, not even with standing water in them. And they're extremely important in our food chains here in the Southeast. And they're an indicator of water quality, because if all you have in your body of water is crane fly larvae, you're in trouble.
So like so many things in nature, you're looking more for a balance than just the highest possible number of these things.
Rightio. And I love these. But this is even better. Corey, tell us the name of this. You figured it out last night, and it's a wonderful name.
I believe it's the alluring tiger. I forgot what the other part is.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I didn't see how you could forget it.
That's okay. I can look it up.
This is one of the tiger moths.
Yes.
And we discovered last night that it is the agreeable tiger moth.
You're right. Which
makes one glad that there are no disagreeable tiger moths in the book or on iNaturalist. But I got quite a chuckle because Corey was working on iNaturalist, and then if we had a question, I was poking around in my field guides to see if I could add to the fun. And on the same page as the agreeable moth, or the agreeable tiger moth, was the dubious tiger moth. Now, think of all the great jokes you could write with insect names. I'm telling you, insects are the bomb.
So what was, what was so agreeable about it? I guess it's pretty. Is that the, I'm always curious about these names. I love the Latin names as well. And especially when the Latin name kind of conflicts or almost, it's almost like an addition to the common name. There are some good ones, and I think that needs to be one of our live streams, is get some real nerds on here to talk about Latin names.
Oh, yes, I love them as well. Some of them just sound wonderful.
Okay. And Bert, you can let Megan know that she is correct.
Now, who wants to take this one? Did we ever confirm it, Corey?
I don't know that we did. Yes, we did.
Okay, because I'd be willing to stake my professional reputation on it.
I mean, it looks like a cricket to me. I don't know much detail, but
you nailed it.
All right.
You see, this isn't always hard.
Not always a trick question, no?
It's a field cricket.
Field cricket, okay. Now, this is a beautiful moth here.
This was our big catch of the evening. This was the biggest, showiest one that we had. Hasn't Corey taken nice pictures? After he took a few pictures, I gave up trying because I couldn't compete. And he was doing a fabulous job. And this is, I think, Mark, you were thinking about this one, named for the tree whose leaves its caterpillar eats.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this must be the tulip. And I don't remember if it said tulip tree moth or just tulip moth or.
It's the tulip tree silk moth.
Tulip tree silk moth. And what's the silk part? What I see that in a few of the common names.
Well, all right. Let me see. Where do I start with this one? Many insect larvae have silk glands on either side of their mouths. But the most famous of them are the silk moth caterpillars that eat mulberry leaves and live in, is it China? And that's where the silk trade started, because those clever people figured out that they could take the pupa, once the silk moth had woven its pupal covering, its cocoon, with the silk from the glands on the sides of its mouth, that they could kill the insect inside and take the silk and I don't know what you call that when you do this to something that's a textile and make it back into threads and then weave it into the silk that we know and wear. And so moths and silk kind of go together, but a lot of insect larvae especially can produce silk. Think about a paper wasp nest that's made of paper that the adult wasp made by chewing up fibers and adding spit and making paper to put the babies in. But then the larvae, after they go through their 5 stages of growing, eating and growing and shedding their skins, they need to pupate. They need to become a pupa and rearrange their body parts to be an adult wasp. And they weave a silk ceiling in their cell. All this time, they've had their greedy little faces sticking out, and their adults have been sticking food into their greedy little faces, not unlike a baby bird. But then when it's time to pupate, they weave this ceiling, this roof on the top of their cell, and now they're safe inside to pupate. And when they turn into an adult wasp, they have the mouth parts to chew through the silk and get out. And a lot of insects use a strategy that's similar to that. They use silk for something. Some of them use it to fold a leaf over and hold it together so they can hide inside. And there's your paper wasp nest. Well done.
Since you brought that up, I saw this one last night. This is one of the things that I uploaded, and it is interesting. They can find all the little nooks and crannies in your house and around, your shed and all that kind of stuff, and they love building in these little nooks and crannies. So this is actually one that was already abandoned, but that we actually saw on our little iNaturalist walk last night.
Our native paper wasps tend to build in a sheltered but open place. In the last 10 years, a paper wasp has been introduced to North America from Europe, and that paper wasp seeks out little cracks and crevices. I had them build inside the pole of a chain link fence at my house, and I know at Reflection Writing, you all had one up in a crack in the play structure out back.
Okay.
So people need to be aware of that if you're having a wasp problem, but you can't find a nest, you need to start thinking about what's a little hole that's protected where these new exotic wasps may be building.
Interesting. So you're actually telling me something that might help with this ID, because I ID'd it to the genus Polistes, but I didn't know exactly what it was because I don't see any actual wasps in the picture. But one of the things that's really fascinating to me too about iNaturalist is a lot of times you don't need to see the organism to be able to identify down to a species level. The evidence of the organism might be enough to do that sometimes.
And then I have a question for you, Mark. So now with this new information, can you go back to that record that you made and ask the question for other naturalists to ponder, could this be the exotic European paper wasp?
Absolutely.
Question mark. And see if you get some help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked to a lot of people who, let me switch back to this one. Okay, so I've talked to some people who they're afraid to guess incorrectly. And so they're not going to go any further in their ID than what they absolutely are sure of. But I'm a naturalist, like we talked about earlier. I don't have any ego in this, and I'm okay with being wrong. And so what I would probably do is go do a little bit more research and pick one that I have a pretty good hypothesis that that's the one that it was, or at least, try to narrow it down. And I would suggest that ID. If you look at the way that they phrase it on here, what you're doing is you're suggesting an identification. I'm not logged in, but if I were logged in, that suggests, let me go ahead and log in real quick and see this makes more sense. So everybody remembers, science is a series of hypotheses, and it's okay to be wrong, but we're inviting people to help us here. So there is a guinea paper wasp. Now, one of the things that's actually useful about this app that I like a lot too is that as long as you have a location in your original observation, it will annotate on its visual suggestions the things that have been seen nearby. Now, it's perfectly plausible that you're the first person to see a particular species in an area. That happens. It's not common because there are so many people using the app at this point, but it's possible. So I see a guinea paper wasp and I see a European paper wasp, both of which are, and oh, here's another one, an organ pipe mud dauber wasp. Now, in this case, I'd probably just go click this view here. And if you hold the command on Mac anyways, if you hold command and then hit that view button, it'll open up different tabs. And so this is how I end up on huge rabbit holes when I'm trying to identify things. But this is part of what I love so much about the platform, because you learn so much. I would probably click view on all these ones that were seen nearby and spend an hour just reading about wasps.
Wasps are pretty interesting, especially those mud daubers you brought up.
Yeah.
Julia, I would like for you to have some time to talk a little bit about what you were wearing last night and the importance of fashion within the blacklighting community.
Thank you, Corey, for not letting me forget fashion tips. So if you're just checking your porch light, you can just go and look at your porch light. If, however, you only leave one porch light on, you unscrew the rest and you put a sheet under it, and you begin to get a big arrival of insects, a lot of insects on your sheet, you want to dress appropriately for going out to meet them. If you're going to be standing around in the weeds to do a black light like Corey and I did last night, you're going to want to wear closed-toed shoes and long pants and fold up the pants and pull your socks over them. And that will keep things from crawling up your pants legs. They probably won't hurt you, but it'll probably make you dance and scream, and people will make fun of you, and that's not why we go blacklighting. Even when you're appropriately dressed, sometimes you get insects joining you in your clothing. Corey can tell you more about that. He took on a moth inside his jacket last night. But you need to think, if you're using a black light anyway, you need to think about the fact that anything that's white about you is going to reflect that black light and attract insects, which is why I'm wearing this bandana on my head, because I have very white hair. And while I like insects and I don't mind them landing on me and walking on me, because then I can go, oh, what are you? Are you interesting? It's a good way to meet insects. But I really don't, they tickle when they get in my hair. So I covered up my hair with something dark. I wore a dark shirt. I wore my uniform shirt over a dark turtleneck to cover up these winter white arms, so that I wouldn't have bugs crawling up my short sleeves. And had I worn a white t-shirt, I'd have been a whole nother blacklighting sheet, attracting bugs right and left. So I wanted that dark shirt. And then it's good to have another light source with you, mostly so that you can use it as a pointer. Because if you stick out your finger and touch the sheet, and it moves and all the bugs fly away, you've just lost all your friends who wanted to see the bugs, and you scared them away. So if you use a flashlight for a pointer or a headlamp for a pointer, you can say, oh my gosh, look at that one. Also, when you're taking photographs, as you might for this project, sometimes auxiliary light is a good thing. For a long time, Bill Haley and I would work together, and one would hold a flashlight and one would take a picture. Our cell phone cameras have improved so much, though, that now we seem to get the best pictures when we turn on our flash. That's Mr. Bill's advice to you, and it worked well for Corey last night, as you've seen with the photographs that he has shown. So your light makes a good pointer.
All right, Julia, I'm going to have another Stump the Naturalist. Let's see if you can guess what this one. This is something I found yesterday, and it's something I had never seen before in my life, but it was really cool.
Isn't that cute?
Isn't it?
Oh,
and let me show you the other view.
Oh, wait, you don't have to. Hang on. I'll tell you what to look at. Okay. Look at two things. What's the first thing you think it is?
Well, I thought some kind of fly because of the giant eyes.
Listen to you. You know too much. You're no fun.
Well, that's why, though. If you look at that view,
yeah,
that was the first view that I had, actually. But then I saw these little kind of stripe things on the back end, and I thought I need to get a picture of the other side. And so it was a very cooperative subject, and stayed there long enough that I was able to get a picture of both sides of it.
Right. Those big wraparound eyes give away faking flies all the time. There are a lot of flies that fake being bees and wasps, because then everybody draws back and says, ooh, I don't want that to sting me, instead of saying, oh, look at that delicious little morsel, and eating it. The other giveaway is the situation and orientation of the antennas. I honestly can't remember at this moment in time where a bee's antennas are, but I don't think they look quite like that. But that is cute, and it's small because it's on a daisy fleabane, isn't it? So
yeah, it was tiny, tiny.
Yeah, that's a cute one. Fake and fly, actually, you can't fool us.
Yeah, so this is one of my next purchases. Maybe I'll get this for Christmas. Is a good macro lens. This is actually taking on the lens that I use for birding, and so I was mostly out looking for birds. But one of the cool things about a super zoom lens is if you see a bug and you can get far enough away from it, you can get right on top of it by zooming right in. Again, if it stays still long enough, that's usually my problem.
Right. And actually there is a kind of a trap specifically for catching flying insects. It works well for flies and bees, wasps, and ants when they're reproducing and have wings. And some dragonflies, it's called a Malaise trap, and it looks a lot like a tent without walls. It's I can't go down into, well, I kind of can. Here we go. It's a mesh. It has mesh walls that are arranged like this. And then each of those compartments made by the walls goes up to a collecting jar at the top. So there are lots and lots of ways to trap insects if you're interested enough to do that in order to see what you have living around your house. A Malaise trap costs about $200. This is the Malaise trap. My blacklight rig is so old that I really don't know what they cost anymore. I think I paid about $100 for mine, but I've been using it for 20 years, so they're probably twice that. But there are always other ways to catch, attract, and have a good look at insects.
So, Julia, are you from the South? Are you from Chattanooga originally?
I'm not from Chattanooga. I started life on the other end of the state in Shelby County, in Cordova, when it was a farming community. And then my family moved out of the country, and then I married the military and went around for a while. And finally fetched up back here because this is the vacation end of the state. I wanted the rest of my life to be a vacation.
I like it. Well, the reason I was asking is I wonder, have you ever heard of a twofer?
Yes, but it wasn't an insect.
Okay, here is an interesting one. Here's one for you. So this is an interesting conversation to have on iNaturalist. What happens if you have more than one species in a photograph?
Well, I don't know, Mark. You're the iNaturalist expert. You tell us.
I will. Okay, so here I pulled up two of them. I was just looking back through my my fun insect photos. This is pipevine swallowtail, and y'all know which one that is. Corey?
What's that?
Which one is the pipevine swallowtail?
The one on the left.
That's right. That's the one I was talking about earlier. You have to have a pipevine plant in order to have a pipevine swallowtail. So what I did with this one is I wrote on here, I said the left of the first, well, that was actually confusing. I would do this differently now that I'm saying it. But anyways, I would put a comment in and I would say, I think this is a pipevine swallowtail, and I'm talking about the one on the left. And then what I would do is I would go over here to this little edit section and I would hit duplicate. And when I duplicated it, it would turn into basically the same thing. And then here, instead of saying pipevine swallowtail, I would go say, this is an eastern tiger swallowtail. And I would say, these are the two on the right that I'm pointing to in this particular ID. And then if I'm really trying to get extra credit, I would actually go cross-link these, and I would put, which I'm going to do right now. So I would go get the pipevine swallowtail, and I would go to the eastern tiger swallowtail, and I would say, I don't know, pipevine swallowtail observation here, and I could put that link in. And then when I make that comment, you could actually just link straight from one to the other. This is also really useful if you have a picture of something that's being eaten by something else, which are some of my favorite photos to add to iNaturalist. There's actually, there's a whole section in here called annotations. And so you can go in and say whether this is an adult or, let me actually get rid of that real quick. And I'll show you what the life stage looks like. I am noticing that iNaturalist is running a little bit slow, as is the rest of the internet probably. There's a ton of activity on iNaturalist right now because of the City Nature Challenge. So if anything kind of doesn't work correctly or it seems to be taking a minute, just give it a second. It's usually going to be fine. But on this life stage, you can actually annotate adult, pupa, larva, and egg. This obviously changes depending on the taxon that you're in. But I'm going to go ahead and put adult back on there. You can also do alive and dead, and you can do sex if you're able to determine it, or you can say that it cannot be determined. The annotations are super cool, but there's also another thing called observation fields. And one of my favorite one is eaten by, or like being eaten by ants. That's an observation field that you can actually put on your observation. I see these mostly being used by scientists that are studying something very specific, and so they'll go try to find instances of this thing that they're talking about. One good example of that, too, if we go back to the City Nature Challenge, I actually found a really cool rust. It's a rust that seems to be on brambles, blackberry type plants. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Might take me a second. But I've had, well, one good example that I can think of right off the top of my head is I had a researcher that was researching trillium. He's actually researching that is specific to trillium. And so he found one of my pictures of a trillium in the Great Smoky Mountains somewhere, where I had a picture of this disease affecting the leaf of the trillium. And so the scientist commented and said, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about it? Did you notice it on any of the other ones? And that's always the most fun part of iNaturalist for me. As you start to kind of observe more and more over time, you're going to run into situations where you actually have people reach out to you and say, see if you can find that again. It's something that I'm really interested in. I'm studying. Keep your eyes open for that. So, well, we've kept you for an hour. Miss Julia from Tennessee Aquarium, thanks so much for being with us. Let me ask one more time, if anybody has any final questions, we're happy to answer them here. If not, we'll let you get back to your Saturday.
Well, I would love to answer some questions, and thank you again for including me, because it's been grand fun. Last night was marvelous, relaxing, interesting, and it's been good to be with you here.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much, Julia, for being a part of what we're doing.
All right, I'll stand by for a little bit, see if there are any questions.
Cool, sounds good. And I'm going to jump back over to, while we're here, jump back over to the project real quick, because I have noticed our numbers going up. Actually, even while we're sitting here, people are obviously getting out while it's nice outside. We are at almost 1,300 observations, 571 species. Almost 100 people have helped us identify what we're looking at, and then we have 128 observers. I may actually even be filtered. One of the things that you can do is search. And so we can go search. If you are particularly knowledgeable in something, we need your help, because one of the things that is going to happen here is we're going to have a ton of activity and a ton of new observations, and we're going to need some help identifying them. So you can actually go to this filter up here on the top right. And I love the little categories because they have these icons, so they're really easy. It's really easy to find what you want. In this case, I can click insects. Might as well get those arachnids too, because they're fun. And then I can update that search, and I can see how many we end up with. So 167 observations. I can also filter down just to the things that need ID. So if you look under this show section, there is a needs ID. So I'll do that needs ID, and then I'll update that and see how many we get down to. So we're down to 120. So out of that 167, 120 of them still need an ID. So if you are, oh, here's one that I recognize. The green lacewings are fun.
Mark, your mother had a question for the aquarium people.
Well, does the aquarium breed native insects to feed native fishes? That's a great question.
It is a great question. Actually, we do feed some insects to some of our animals at the aquarium, not the fish as much as, say, the lizards and the turtles. The birds get some too as a treat, but we don't breed them in-house. That would take a great deal of space and a great deal of labor. And oddly, insects are available commercially. And I know that we get weekly shipments of mealworms and crickets to feed to a variety of animals. And then not quite as frequently, we get waxworms, which is a moth caterpillar. It's fatter and softer, has more fat in it than the mealworms do. But they're an important part of the diets of some of our animals. So we don't breed our own. We order them, and they come via DHL or UPS, and that's what we feed.
We do the same thing. We mostly order commercially, but we do have a little insectary where we raise
Roaches.
They're a certain type of roach. Corey, I can't remember what kind of roach it is. Do you?
Starts with the D.
They're really gross, is what they are.
Aw, now.
When you open that box and there's just hundreds of them, it's not my favorite thing. But thanks so much. Really quick, I'm just going to sign off for us. Head over to reflectionwriting.org/plan. It's kind of backwards for me. We do have, because we are not open to the public right now, we are doing our plant sale online exclusively. If you don't know what you want, that we can help you. We are setting up phone consultations, so you can tell us, I have a shaded area of a certain size and it's well drained, whatever, what should I put there, and we'll figure it out. Our plant guys are awesome. Dylan or Scotty will talk to you on the phone. We also have Matt Whitaker from our board, who has helped us out quite a bit in terms of plant selection. But if you go to that reflectionwriting.org plants, check out what we have. There is a little form that you can fill out. You can tell us if you already know what you want, and you can tell us if you don't know what you want. We'll figure out a time to call you back, and then we'll either deliver to you, or we will arrange for a pickup on site. So if you want insects, go get some plants. Thanks so much, everybody. Follow us on
Good
subscribe.
to be with you, gentlemen.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Julie.
much. Hopefully we can see you again soon.
I hope so. Have a great afternoon.
Have a good day. Keep observing. We got 2 more days.